The Portfolio Composer, episode 216.
You're listening to the Portfolio Composer podcast with your host and coach, Jerod Hope, where he teaches you what it takes to master the business end of writing music through mindset, marketing, and business skills. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter at theportfoliocomposer.com for exclusive offers, business insights, and information not shared on the podcast. And now, for this episode of The Portfolio Composer.
And I believe every single person on this planet is born to somebody. We are born naturally brilliant, naturally creative, and we are all given our own set of superpowers. I really, truly believe that. Humans are made to abstract and be creative, and it just doesn't end. Human creativity is without end. I think it's beautiful. I encourage people to look at their own individual unique experience, because we all have a totally unique experience, and it has possibility and beauty to be extracted and to find what our identity is. And again, what's your superpower?
This episode is brought to you by Dorico, the music notation software from Steinberg. Just released, Dorico Pro 2 is a major new version, including features for musicians working in film and TV music and in jazz, rock, and pop. Steinberg have also released Dorico Elements, a new entry-level application that packs all of the essential power of Dorico Pro into a simple, streamlined package that is ideal for those getting started. Find out more later in the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 216 of the Portfolio Composer podcast. I'm your host, your coach, your teacher, Jerod Hope. I'm super excited to release today's interview because this is an interview that has been a year and a half to 2 years in the making as I have built this fantastic relationship with Jerod. And I think you're going to get a lot out of this. This will probably change your perspective on the possibilities that lay in front of you as a creative individual and as a highly trained, exceptionally skilled person, a musician, a composer, a performer. Today's interview is with Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate. And Jerod is a dedicated American Indian classical composer and pianist who expresses his native culture in symphonic music, ballet, and opera. All of his compositions have been commissioned by major North American orchestras, ensembles, and organizations, and his works are performed throughout the world. He's currently working on commissions for the Dallas Symphony, the Apollo Chamber Players in Houston, and the Maracay Duet in Washington, D.C. And the day this episode releases, my family and I are going to go see a live performance of Jerod's cantata Standing Bear, about Chief Standing Bear and his life. I'm absolutely impressed with Jerod's perspective and his positivity and his energy. I hope you are as inspired as I am. Enjoy. Jerod, it's so great to speak with you. Welcome to the Portfolio Composer.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Now, I need a little bit of guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Can you please introduce yourself to the listeners and to me in your native language and teach us how to pronounce your name?
Absolutely. Chukma, Chinchukmata Hatak, Sahos Jafoi, Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, Chikashasaya, Talo Ekbisaya, Hashlaka Sayopa, Chukmashki Yakoke. Hello, everyone. My name is Jerod Impichchaachaaha Tate, and I am a citizen of the Chickasaw Nation in Oklahoma. And I'm a professional classical composer, and I'm very, very happy to be here today.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. You reached out to me, was it 2 years ago? And just started a conversation.
Yeah.
Just saying, hey, I listened to the podcast. Thank you for this. And honestly, Jerod, those emails come very rarely. So just getting a little bit of a word of encouragement helps a lot.
Wow.
And so thank you. And then we just kind of started talking. And every once in a while, there'd be a question about, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
And then a few months ago, my friend, Stacey Garrop, who I love and know, and you've listened to her interviews on the podcast, she's just a pure inspiration.
The feeling is mutual, yes.
Yeah, she sent me this text out of the blue. She said, hey, do you know Jerod Tate yet? I'm like, well, yeah, we've been communicating. You have to have him on your podcast. So, Stacey, I present to you Jerod Tate.
Yay.
Yeah, so it's great to have you, man.
Hey, thanks. I really appreciate this. I will admit I am a little nervous because I discovered your show, I would say, maybe not quite 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago, when I just actually started becoming a podcast junkie. And I was like, there's got to be shows about classical music. And I just started to browse. And man, Portfolio Composer came up right away. And the thing that really just nailed me at the beginning was the word portfolio, because in the teaching that I've done in the last 15 to 20 years, I've been speaking to musicians with that actual word. I've been telling them, you need to think of yourself as a portfolio musician.
Yeah.
And so when I saw your podcast title, I was like, I'm in like Flynn. I was just immediately excited about your language. And I'm grateful to that because we are entrepreneurs.
Yes.
But most people actually, you know what? Every living person on this planet is an entrepreneur. It's that simple.
Agreed.
Yep. No matter what you do, you're assembling your life, and that's it. We are all entrepreneurs. So we are an 8 billion plus company.
Yeah, really. But there's the difference between recognizing that and then embracing it. And some people ignore it, and we still want the job. We go to school to become better musicians, and we just want to get that job in the teaching district, or we just want to get the orchestral position.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you react to that. What are you saying to people? Why do you encourage them to develop a portfolio career?
Well, one thing I appreciate that, man. The thing I like about, look, I'm really, really grateful to be alive today. I love this time that we live in. I have a very high optimism about a lot of things. I like feeling that way. It's really cool. Now, as a classical person, I grew up in the 80s. I went to college in the 80s. And so it was really popular in the media to say, is classical music dying? And I remember there was like a Time magazine article about it or something like that. And I remember seeing that sentiment going on. And of course, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd to say that classical music is dying. In fact, it's prospering at a rate that is just insurmountable. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And just the waves of improvement that go on in the trumpet during this couple of years, or back in the French horn this couple of years, and percussion. It's just unbelievable. I mean, like, I was just on YouTube listening to all these awesome, like, kind of Motown-y bass people. I mean, the technique on the electric bass is just phenomenal. Back in the day when Pistorius was, pioneering all this stuff. Well, now that's normal.
Yes.
And it's better. I mean, you wouldn't think you could get in better than Jaco Pastorius, but they're all like playing just like 8-year-olds are doing this kind of thing. So I'm very optimistic about it. So when you go back and you look at these fun statements of like classical music's dying, well, when we were in college at that time, there was a compartmentalization that was going on, and it was very formalized. Like, you were either a conductor or a performer or a composer. And if you were a performer, like I was a piano performance major at first, well, you were either going to be a very famous solo concert artist like Evgeny Kissin, or you were going to be a university professor, or you were going to be a professional accompanist or a piano teacher, or there was either or. There was never this combination. Well, the thing that I love about millennials today is that they've broken all that again, and everybody has become everything all at the same time. And back in the day in classical history, that's exactly what musicians were. They were total musicians. Yes. I mean, look at this. Chopin made a living teaching piano. That's how he made his living. Mm-hmm. And same with Debussy. Debussy was a very famous piano teacher, and he made a lot of income off that. And then he would have this fabulous orchestral commission, and then he would go conduct something, and then he'd be a music critic for something else. And so there was a total musicianship, and all of the great musicians in history that we know of were total musicians in every front. And so now I see composers and performers that there's no line anymore, and arrangers, or somebody who creates a new ensemble. They're managers of their own ensemble that they compose for and direct and play in. It's fantastic. I absolutely love it. We're getting back to that portfolio lifestyle. And so when I was teaching, when I started my intentful teaching and composition, I was telling people, I'm like, look, you are performers and you're composers, and you're going to be a conductor, and you're going to music direct this, and you're going to do this. And so, I tell people, embrace that, because actually that's going to be a much more fun lifestyle than this horrible 80s outlook of like, I've got to be a solo pianist or I fail,
right?
Yeah. If you don't make your orchestral audition, well, now what people do is they start their own orchestras, and I think that's brilliant.
Yes. So, yeah, you can look through any of the greats. I remember in my doctoral studies, I had to take a history of theory, basically, and the development of modern Western musical theory. Mm-hmm. And one of the few things that completely overwhelmed me in the course was the idea that these theorists, who were often writing composition treatises, are writing that information in the midst of mathematical and science treaties. And being a musician is part of the classical liberal arts, right? It's a well-rounded person, and that all of our greatest composers throughout history who have written the canon that we still perform, they weren't only composers, they were teachers, they were performers, and all performers composed. And we've completely divided that. So now you're either a composer or a performer. And the rare composer-performer, like any current day Chopin, is kind of a surprise. And you're like, no, this is the way it always was.
Well, I'm going to top you on the optimism. That's the way it is for us old guys. Actually, it's the kids who are showing us apps. They're not even thinking about that anymore.
No, they're not. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. It is so awesome. I feel fuel injected because I'm like, yes, there's a whole group of all these 20-somethings going, yeah, I do everything. Yeah. Sure. Right. I'm like, yeah, I just love that attitude. It's a very natural, like, well, of course I'm doing all this stuff. Why wouldn't I? Exactly. That's exactly where we want to be. So it's kind of our mid-age group that's I think coming to grips with that even more. But it's like we're having like this renaissance with ourselves. It's like this rebirth into our own field. I love it. It's just fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your portfolio. What are all the things that you're currently doing to produce income as a musician?
Well, I am okay. Let's hear. I do a few things. Okay, so I'm very fortunate, and I've worked very hard to do this. But my primary income is from commissions, and so. But I also teach piano, and I can flex my piano studio depending on income needs. Now, I won't just do it like willy-nilly. Like I'll dedicate myself to a certain track because kids need you to be there for a good chunk of time. So I'm not cavalier about it, but I do teach. But also, I've gotten to the age in my career to where I'm asked to be a resident of some kind. And that can vary. Like sometimes I will simply be a resident composer and like, this is Jerod Tate and he's cool and here he is for a week at this school. That's usually paired with a performance of one of my works and I'll give a series of lectures that goes with it. Or sometimes I'll actually perform in it. I'll play the piano and the part of that kind of thing. But there's usually within those residencies, there's a variable. It varies depending on what the people want me to do. So sometimes I'll go out and go to public schools for an entire week and visit 20 some odd public schools and just, it's like a rat race. It's awesome. And then sometimes it's just one focused performance and I'll either play and give a lecture, that kind of thing. So I will travel for appearances as well. So, and then also every once in a while, I'll have something very random happen, like something I discussed with you just recently, because I was looking to you for advice on this. I just composed a podcast for the first time, and that was really, really cool. We're just wrapping this up. I'm just doing their last iteration. Just sent that in last night.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And then also, every once in a while, my music is being licensed, which is really, really nice as well. So there's a couple of things like that. But of course, then there's performances of my music in which I'm sending out scores and reaping BMI benefits, which is really nice. So that's basically, I have like 4 pockets of income like that. That's how I make a living.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and I think a lot of people want to get there. So many of us, as we're starting our careers, still have non-musical jobs in the mix. And you know what? That's okay. You got to do what you got to do to pay the bills.
Yes.
I'm at a point now where all of my income streams are music related, but it's still not at the proportions I want, right? So it's a process. We're working towards it. So you identify, you are 100% Chickasaw. What role does that have in your career, or does it have any? And I want you to know, Jerod, that I hesitate to ask this question because I like to view composers just as, hey, you write music, right? So I've interviewed people of color, I've interviewed women and men composers, and to me, it's not those identity markers aren't attached to the thing.
Right.
But you, in your branding, emphasize this, and so I'm bringing it up. Talk to me more about that.
I will talk to you about that. And it's because I do have a mixed experience that I think is really, it completely shaped who I am. And I like to share the story because I like to encourage people to look at themselves and their personal experience in relationship to their life desires and their dreams about being a musician or whatever it is they're going to do. And so I'm actually not 100% Chickasaw. I'm a mix. My mother, Patricia, was from Omaha, actually. She grew up in Lincoln, where you are. Ooh. And Mom is Manx Irish. And Mom was a professional dancer and choreographer. And my father, Charles, is Chickasaw from Ardmore, Oklahoma. And Dad is a retired lawyer, tribal judge, and special district judge. And Dad is also a classically trained pianist and baritone. So, so between the reason I say all of this is because I have a life that was given to me by two parents who were very involved in the arts. And it's really funny because it's my Indian father who started me on the piano. I mean, he's the one that played repertoire in the house. And so I loved the piano as a kid. And when I started piano lessons, I mean, it was 3 months into lessons. I was like, I told my parents, I'm going to be a concert pianist. That's the way it's going to be. I mean, I knew I was going to be a classical musician at that point. And so, and I started late. I was almost 9 when I started the piano, but I was just around it all the time. So the reason I say all of this is because between my two parents, I grew up in theater. And so I grew up in ballets, opera, musical theater, straight plays, modern dance, every possible style of dance. My mother was actually an expert belly dancer and flamenco dancer, as well as classically trained as in ballet and tap and jazz. And so I was around all kinds of ethnic dance as well as classical music, and I was just surrounded by it. And I grew up in theater. I call myself a theater brat, like people would call it, army brat,
Right.
because I was in rehearsals all the time. And I mean, I helped. I did stage. I was in the productions. I performed in them. I had roles. I was Gerardino in the opera Gianni Schicchi, in fact, and I was actually Theo in the musical Pippin, which is a musical way back from the early '80s. And anyway, but I mean, I did my own makeup. I built sets. I played the trumpet, so I was in pit orchestras. I played piano in pit orchestras. I did arrangements. I helped my mom edit music. I ran lights, sound. I mean, just all kinds of stuff that I did as a kid in theater. And so the reason I say all this is because when I finally started composing, there were two very strong elements that were informing me as a musician. One is a strong identity as a Chickasaw Indian, and then also that of a person who grew up in theater. And so you can imagine the storytelling aspects are natural to both of those, but also I'm very romantic about how I feel about being Indian. And so, and so when I grew up, with these romantic ballets of Romeo and Juliet and Rite of Spring, well, it all just really coalesced beautifully when I started to write. And so I feel like I have a very dramatic sense of my expression. And so anyway, that's kind of how my makeup is. And so as I dive into what I do as a musician, I go in with a great deal of theatrics and passion.
That helps with the entertainment, right?
Yes.
Though that's not the source of what you're doing. Continue.
Yeah. So I mean, so I guess the way that I started was kind of ironic because the way I started to compose, I didn't even think I was going to be a composer. My first composition when I was 23 years old, and I was finishing my piano performance degree at Northwestern University in Chicago, and my mom was doing a new ballet, and she turned to me and she said, I would like you to do my new score, because she wanted to do a ballet based on American Indian stories from the Northern Plains and Rockies. And Mom was teaching at the University of Wyoming at that time, and she had just done a cowboy ballet, basically, and she wanted to do an Indian ballet. So she turns to me and she's like, you're my Indian son, you're a classical musician, you could write my score. And I said, absolutely not. That is crazy. I can't write a ballet. And she's kind of like, dude, what's your problem? Because I mean, well, see here, this kind of really ties into your show, because choreographers historically never separated choreography and performance, never. Oh. And so, all the great, and I grew up in all this great dance history. So I know of like Ruth St. Denis and Ted Shawn and Martha Graham and all these people who created ballet companies as choreographers / performers all the time. Isadora Duncan, same example. Merce Cunningham. I mean, all these choreographic groups, well, they were making their own, production companies and making their own costumes and doing the whole thing. So of course Mom was like, well, you can write my score. But I was being very informed by that formalized idea, like, oh, I haven't composed anything formally yet. I can't just do that. Well, I mean, look, Mozart didn't write a piano concerto until he wrote a piano concerto. Puccini didn't write an opera until he wrote an opera. So it's the same type of thing. So finally, but it just stuck with me because of the nature of the ballet. And I found myself stopping practicing Brahms and composing a new work. And so I came to Mom with material, and she was like, all right, she liked it. And we did a ballet together. So my first composition was actually commissioned by my mother, and it was a very good commission, because that's the kind of person she was. And I can talk about that in terms of the business side when we get to that. But Mom was my inroad into composing. And it's funny because my Irish mother was the one that tapped me into my Indian identity as a classical musician. And so I did the ballet and I got done, and I felt like it was like I'd just come out of, like, of a Thanos' snap. Really. And I was like, okay, I just wrote a ballet. What does this mean? And I had a lot of people telling me, both from the Indian and non-Indian communities, just like, dude, you got to do this. This is like something real. And they thought I did well. And also it was just something that, it was just like a spot that had a vacancy, so to speak. Now, there are other American Indian composers. I can tell you about them, but we are far and few between. And so anyway, so that's how it all started. And what I did is, at that point, I had been accepted into the Cleveland Institute of Music as a piano performance major. I had started my degree, and I stopped to go tour the ballet with Mom in the Rockies. And then I came back and I added composition to my degree with Don Erb at the Cleveland Institute of Music.
That's so amazing. And first of all, kudos to your mom, right? Like,
yes.
There's how should I say this? I don't really care who you are. There's always somebody who opens that first door for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great story. And one thing you said really stuck out to me here, Jerod. You said that the result of all this, you were hearing from multiple communities.
Yes.
That there was a vacancy. Like, here's someone who can do this thing. And that happened to be an Indian composer writing contemporary classical music.
Yes.
Or however the words get fuzzy, right? But and let's talk a little bit about this, because this is, as you've heard me say on the podcast before, your niche. Sometimes our niche chooses us.
Right. Yes.
And I know that you prefer a different language around that idea. So what is your term that you prefer for instead of niche?
Identity.
Okay.
And the thing is, it's like here I've got, of course, I'm telling you this story after how many decades of working on this. And I couldn't, I didn't say it with this kind of clarity, 25 years ago. And so I can package it, and it sounds very packaged and maybe a little unattainable, because it's a little bit on the romantic side. But of course, that's part because I'm just dramatic in how I say things anyway. So that comes across like that. But the thing is that at that time I was very confused. Like, what does this mean for me? Who am I, and what do I mean to myself? I mean, these were really fundamental questions, and they're not easy. And it's not easy to get into your own psyche and figure out who you are. It can be scary, actually. To me, it was scary. What do I do as a composer? Oh my, is that who I am? And if I do, am I faking people? Am I being a gimmick? All this kind of stuff. There was all kinds of really deep questions that I was asking myself. So it's not that it's just like, this. However, I was born this way. It was, to me, a gift from the Creator. And it was an opportunity for me to look at who I was born, what I believe who I was born to be. Mm-hmm. And I believe every single person on this planet is born to be somebody. We are born naturally brilliant, naturally creative, and we are all given our own set of superpowers. I really, truly believe that about the world. And the thing is, what's so cool is that we're unique because we abstract our lives. Humans are made to abstract and be creative, and it just doesn't end. Human creativity is without end. I think it's beautiful. So anyway, having said all that, I encourage people to look at their own individual unique experience, because we all have a totally unique experience, and it all has possibility and beauty to be extracted, and to find what our identity is. And again, what our superpower is, basically. So I guess niche, another good word is what's your superpower?
Sure. Yeah.
I'm saying that a whole bunch of because I've got a 5-year-old kid. So we're watching so much Marvel right now. I'm Marblehead. And all I'm thinking about is like people's superpowers. And my son asked me, Daddy, what's my superpower? He literally asks me that. I'm like, oh wow. I'm like, we don't know yet, son. We're finding that out, but it's a beautiful question. But anyways, that I'm kind of repeating myself, but I like to think of our niche as following our superpower with absolute dedication and trust and belief that's what our chosen path is. That's what I believe.
So once you embraced this about yourself, you embraced your superpower. What has that done for your career?
Well, it made it both very glorious and very complex. I mean, I guess what it did, it gave me definition, which was great. And then I saw this huge, vast universe that I had to trek across, and I had more question marks than I had ever had in my entire life. So what it did is it opened up a life full of question marks and uncertainty, to be quite honest. Here I became certain, and then it opened up all this uncertainty. But that's the zen of life. It's like, that's when it becomes the journey rather than the end and all that kind of stuff. But I do believe that it does start with listening to inner voices and then trusting those inner voices. But man, I'll tell you, I've had all kinds of ups and downs that are, pretty phenomenal. I've, financial, personal, all kinds of things that everybody has. But at the end of the day, what I'm very glad about is that I've chosen my personal passion to have this experience with. I believe that it is unavoidable to have pain and suffering in a life, and it's unavoidable to have confusion and questioning yourself. Those are going to happen in your life, and I believe that it's with that in mind. Let's choose then the path of our passion, because it's going to happen anyway. So let's pick it's like choose our, I don't say choose your poison. That's a really negative way to say it. But it's like, but every passion is going to have agony with it. And so choose it, because you're going to have it anyway. And again, it's like being a young, I'm not young, but my son is young, and young in fatherhood. I'm looking at this kid going, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt no matter what. So I'm going to help him through the hurt, and I'm going to help him embrace the hurt. So, he's skinning his knees now. And every time he does, I'm like, yeah, success. And because it's like he skinned his knees. He now knows what his skin looks like on the inside. And so I hope that he can learn that he's going to have those pitfalls in life, but that he'll choose a passion in his life that makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's a Buddhist saying that all life is suffering. And one of the things that I've really been embracing in my life recently is the idea that, the struggle is not just a part of the journey, but it's actually maybe the main idea of the journey.
It's necessary.
It's absolutely necessary. Like I want a painless existence where I don't have to worry about finances, and my daughter's not causing strife, and whatever is going on in my life. But, that's not how life is. And once I changed my perspective, and maybe this is true for you, life just got much more enjoyable. It's like, okay, this is really crappy, and this is really hard. And you know what? This is a challenge. I can get through this challenge. This is a problem to be solved, and I'm going to enjoy the problem while it's here.
Yeah, and I agree. And also you choose it. You choose to embrace the problem, how I do say this to is that you've chosen it in your way.
Yeah, you're not being forced on you.
Exactly. You're like, all right, I've got to do this, so I'm going to do it my way. And I like that. And I think everybody is entitled to do that, is entitled to choose that, and is entitled to embrace the beauty that they have the way they do it. There's 8 billion people on this planet. There's 8 billion ways to be a person. Mm-hmm. And there's that many ways to be a musician. It's like every story I hear on your show, man, it's just, I love it, because it's like, yep, another combination. Yep, another combination.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. So sometimes people reach out to me and they want some coaching, but they want a plan, more like a consultation. Do A, and then do B, and C will happen.
Yep.
No, it's like, okay, these can be some best practices, but what I can do is I can help you kind of clear away the cloud of confusion so you can make a better decision.
I agree. Yeah. And the thing is, I'm that way as a teacher, as a composition teacher. I have my handbook to help with clefs mostly, because there's some I still, to this day, because I grew up as a pianist, I still have a hard time with alto clef. It's just going to be the way it is.
It takes a while. Yeah,
it does. And finally I just like, it's just the same. It's just the clef that's smack in the middle between bass and treble. And anyway, so I have my little chart I give people, but by and large, I have very little curriculum. Because it's important for my students to understand that, first of all, I have absolutely no stylistic restrictions. I am here to be basically the best practice coach for you. I am here to help you achieve your idea at the highest level that you can.
Yes.
And I don't care what your idea is. In fact, I don't want you to try to do what I'm doing, because I need to learn something from you as well. And that's just, you're just not going to be the individual that you are. So like, for instance, I do a lot of composition teaching for American Indian youth. I just choose to because, I'm just a little biased, and that's fine. It's just a group of people who need teaching. So, there it is. And so, but the thing is though, and they all know what I do. I'm very on the sleeve about being an identified Chickasaw composer. And I work with, Chickasaw and other American Indian tunes all the time. I mean, basically I'm inspired by the whole Bartokian idea of being a musician. And so they know this, but I do not expect that from them at all. I'm like, you all are modern Native folks, and you have heard all kinds of music that I've never heard of before. You have all kinds of influences that make you the person that you are. And you have that right to be that person. I mean, there's many ways to be an Indian as there are Indians. And I tell them that. It's the same thing globally. So I'm like, so what do you feel? And if you want to do, the ethno type thing, like the ethnographic thing that I do, great. I can help you with technical things. But I don't expect that out of any of my students, no matter what race they are or what their background is. I want them to find their own just gut. What is in your gut? That's your identity. And we may not be able to put words to it just yet, but we'll just be impulsive. Show me what you got, and I'm going to help you make it the absolute best expression you can possibly make it.
This episode is sponsored by Dorico, the future of scoring. And we want to feature real Dorico users so you can know that real composers out in the world today are using Dorico to make their careers happen.
My name's Dan Kreider. I'm a full-time church musician. So I'm typically making lead sheets is the majority of what I do, but I also arrange for just a diversity of instruments, a lot of instrumentation for full orchestra, sometimes a string group, sometimes next Sunday we're having a brass quartet. It's a pretty active schedule, always writing on deadline, always trying to get it done. Most people have something that they're using, and unless they're really fed up with it, they have a workflow. They're accustomed to it, and they like what they know. And in some cases, they perhaps don't realize what something could be. And that, I think, was my case. I had amassed a huge collection of workarounds and third-party plugins and shortcuts. And I had just become accustomed to thinking that was fine and normal. And it just vaguely started to annoy me that once I had finished the creative part of a score, I knew there were 2 hours ahead of me or so to get it looking like it needed to be. And that's honestly what sort of overcame that original entrenchment. You initially maybe adopt a program because of a particular reason, and then you find there's another reason you hadn't even considered. I initially came to Dorico from Finale only because I was tired of tweaking a score and tired of avoiding collisions. But I had not even considered something like non-destructive writing, and also just the output is bold and strong and feels very personal. Those are things that I was pleasantly surprised at. What I love most about it is that scores look beautiful right out of the box. Honestly, that is what I love the most. I can open up the score. I can start entering the notes. I can switch over to engrave mode to check it. I may bump one or two little things, and it's done. I never have to settle for ugly scores again on short notice. I think one of the things that I really appreciate about the development process, and that I think is going to yield the best results in the long run, is that everything is so carefully thought through. In another 6 months to a year, the number of things that Dorico won't do natively is going to be a fraction of what people are going to require of it. There's really no question that I'd recommend it. In fact, I do, and my colleagues give me a kind of a hard time about it, jokingly, because I'm a little bit of an evangelist. I have started offering private tutoring. That's a real interest of mine in helping users, ask questions and evaluate their own workflow and see, okay, there are some other ways that I could really trim down my time and get to the real business, which is making music.
The kind folks at Dorico have set up a special web page so you can go and download a free 30-day trial copy of Dorico. So go and do that. I have been using the program and I'm absolutely in love with it. Go to dorico.com/TPC. I'm interested to talk about your pedagogical philosophies a little bit,
Sure.
since we're kind of heading in that direction. I find teaching composition really challenging. Now, I think approaching it with the framework you just outlined for us would make a huge difference. We've all heard horror stories of teachers at famous universities and conservatories that kind of write the next measure for their students.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're doing that. But then how do you help them take their idea and, using your own words, make it the best expression of that idea ever?
Well, okay, it's called blitzkrieg.
Okay.
Because I've got a finite amount of time with kids, and that's why I've got my manual, because it's like the Rosetta Stone of like, okay, these are the main things we're going to have to really navigate technically. Okay, so clefs, that's a big thing. And now, okay, let me just back up a little bit. Okay, so first of all, I consistently to this day use a string quartet as my model for teaching composition. First of all, it's easy to hire a string quartet locally to perform their works. It's easy to work with a quartet. Second of all, a quartet literally is a mini orchestra. It's a fabulous tool for a wide range of expression for a beginning composer or any composer. And so kids are able to, and then also a string quartet immediately naturally makes you think contrapuntally. And what I mean by that is it splits your brain into 4 realities of relationships and immediately makes you high-level thinking in your relationship in your own music. It's fabulous. I love it. So you got 4 staffs, 4 players, and music, and then you go to town. So, kids will come in either playing guitar or piano or another instrument. But what I do is I will give an opening seminar to the kids and just blast them with like, okay, this is how we break down music. You are now composers. You now analyze. This is who you are. You are now nerds of music. And I encourage you to be nerdy and thinking. And now, after you get done with this, you're never going to hear a piece of music again because you're going to be analyzing it because it's too late. You're a composer. It's like you're sucked in. And so into the black hole of composition. So, but it's basically, it's all you're doing is you're just now deconstructing what you love and then reconstructing it into a place that you like to, to mess with. So anyway, so there's a very quick intro that I will do for a day with kids. I love it because it's high energy. It gets them really engaged, and then they're off and running. And I'm like, start with ideas. And I'll say, start with a tune. What's an idea? What's a texture? We talk about all these kinds of things. It doesn't have to be anything what you think is intellectual. I want to hear some gut reactions. Like, is there anything you've wanted to try your whole life that you just had, just kind of fantasized about? I'd love to do this in music or not. So I will basically like kind of life coach them into coaxing music out of them. And then we're off and running. And based on that, then I start the conversation of like, well, okay, that's a great idea. What do you think? It's like, so, with that idea, what does it make you think about this? I mean, is there things you can do here? Are these possibilities? Look, you have this one line where you can colorize that. You can do all kinds of, and so I just start to throw out possibilities in their life of writing. And then they start to go, ooh, I like this. Ooh, I like this. So I'm just basically showing them the candy shop. And talking them through it. So it's high level coaching. And I am literally, I tell them, I am your living encyclopedia. I am your resource. So if you have an idea, you don't know how to notate it, that's what I'm going to tell you how to do. I am your encyclopedia of knowledge, but you are the impetus for the creativity. So in that short amount of time, we'll turn around string quartets in 5 days. And dude, it's unbelievable what comes out of kids when you just throw them into the water and they go. It's really, really fabulous. I will tell you this. There's another, this is a secret I do. I like to kind of keep it under wraps sometimes because I like the surprise. But the first thing I do when I have my group of kids, the first thing we do is we analyze Michael Jackson's Thriller. That's the first thing we do because most people know what Thriller is. Yeah. But man, it's written by the best. I mean, look, it's Quincy Jones, man, and the guy is a composer. And so if you look at Thriller, it's this perfect arc of the door opening and then all the howling sounds and all the Halloween sounds, and then it ends with the door closing. It's like this perfect rounded composition. And so then you got the Thriller money shot stuff, and it's like, this is great. And so we analyze all the textures and elements going on, and so we'll have this full analyzation of Thriller. And I'm like, and so then they can do that with any pop tune they ever heard. And so, but then right after that, the piece I take them into is Alexander Borodin's In the Steppes of Central Asia. Because it's a very similar thing. It opens and closes with this exact same soft theme, It's based on two quote unquote Russian melodies, and it's really easy to pick apart. And when you put those things together, instantly they're going, I see it, I hear it. And they're in. They're just in because they're naturally analyzing and hearing what's going on. By the way, Alexander Borodin did not make a living as a composer. He was a famous chemist.
Right. Yep.
And and what's the Borodin? What's it called? It's not a Borodin variable. It's just, but there's a Borodin constant or something like that he created that every chemist knows. And he's like one of the, called one of the five, the Russian five composers. So, I'm kind of going off on all kinds of tangents there, but anyway, that's how I teach kids. And as I get them really indoctrinated into and getting their skin in the game as composers, and man, it works. It just works. And when you give them permission just to be who they are, just do it, man. It's incredible. And then what's great is that because they own it, they take themselves seriously in all the right ways. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And then bam. And I mean, I've coached probably 200 new compositions by kids. And man, I would say literally that maybe one was okay. The rest of them are all fabulous.
This is really helpful for me because the last couple of years I've been invited by our local school district during solo and ensemble contests. The school district has created a creativity portion. And so now these students, and these are middle schoolers and high schoolers I'm working with, will come in and perform for me pieces they wrote. And rather than being a traditional solo and ensemble judge where I'm rating them on performance and technique, instead I'm giving them feedback on the elements of music. How are you using harmony? How's your melodic development? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I'm absolutely floored what these 12-year-olds can come up with.
Oh, isn't it incredible? It's nuts.
It's nuts.
Just
Yeah. And the biggest barrier to their ideas being realized is notation. And so getting them, that requires not only a facility in reading music, but also a facility in technology.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes,
and so it's a very interesting thing, but helping these students then take this germ of an idea and be like, okay, here's one thing you might want to try or whatever, work it out.
Yeah. That is one reality that is actually clear is that, a kid's got to be playing an instrument. That's for sure. And I mean, there's only one way to do that is that you got to start, is that in order to play an instrument, you have to play an instrument. And you either have to be in band or take lessons or something like that. So there is that indoctrination, but it's no different than doing poetry in a language. It's like, if you're going to do poetry, you have to speak a language first. That's you can't get around it. Mm-hmm. And then of course, creating poetry, you're literally now deconstructing the language that you've learned and reassembling it into an abstraction that you've done. And so music composition is exactly the same thing. And that is, you have to be able to speak the language a little bit. It doesn't mean you have to be able to exactly notate. You can, like, for instance, I have a lot of guitar students who are playing and they're playing full things. They're doing what they're doing. In general, they're on board with tab, but it's my duty then is to just really, really quickly teach them notation really fast. But you know what? It works. It happens. And they come out reading me. It's like in whatever week or two that I've got them, it's like I've had them for 5 years because I just put in that energy. But however, you can't teach composition to somebody who comes in who has absolutely no familiarity with an instrument at all. That can't happen. And it's because we are teaching a Western-based type of composing. Mm-hmm. And that's inescapable. So, but that's just that.
Right. Universities right now are debating this because there are students who come in and they may not be able to play a traditional instrument, but they know how to create within their software environment, right? Like they can read a MIDI roll and they can program a soft synth and they know how to program whatever.
Yeah.
But then do they get entered into a music major program? It's an interesting problem to have to solve.
Yeah, I guess.
You're not sold. You're I can hear it.
I'll be brutal. The answer is no. Okay, look, we all go to public school and we all have to read and write.
Yep.
It's that simple. You've got to be literate.
Yeah.
And nobody argues that. Literacy is not an argument. It's something to be achieved. And if somebody does not have literacy, there are programs to help them become literate. which is beautiful. It's fabulous. It's because we all want each other to be literate. And any discipline requires literacy of some kind. And look, it's not just in music, and it's not being elitist in music. It's the same thing in cooking. It's, if you're going to a cooking school, there are certain standards that have to happen. If you're going to become a diesel mechanic, there are certain standards that you've got to have. It's got to happen. I mean, in order to achieve anything, you have to have facility in what it is you're achieving. And now, having said that, it depends on the style of music that you're wanting to learn. So if you want to go to college and study classical music, well, you've got to embrace what goes with that. If I don't want to go to college, so if I want to be an expert stomp dancing or powwow musician within my own community, I'm not going to go to college. I'm going to spend time with my community learning it the way I'm supposed to, because it is an art form in and of itself. It's just not taught in college. So whatever it is you're doing, you want to go to the right place to learn how to do it. And of course, that's all being changed like crazy, because it's like, look, all these kids running mission control and SpaceX, a lot of these people learned what they needed to learn to fly rockets by the time they were 15. Mm-hmm. They didn't need college. And even Elon Musk says, I don't care about your college degree. Yep. So it depends. See, that's the thing, is it depends on what you're trying to achieve. If I want to be a certain French master chef, well, I've got to embrace that path of being that specific type of a master chef. It's no different in music. It's no different in any kind of fashion. If you're going into fashion design or anything like that, or if you're studying dental polymers, if I have a specific track and different dental polymers, well, I've got to follow that track. It's that simple, because it's its own art form. So it's not an exclusive thing. It's just a specific thing is the way I look at it.
I agree with you 100%. One of the things you said about it not being elitist, and I think it's okay to be elitist and to defend your elitism, because there's, just like you described, we're specializing.
Well, we're experts.
We're experts. And one of the most interesting books I ever read, I had to read it for a university course, but it just had a profound impact on me, is William Henry's In Defense of Elitism.
Yeah.
And here's this guy who's like, if you were to put him on a political spectrum, about as far left as you can go, but he's still saying, listen, there's a reason for these things, and we have to defend the ability to become specialists and experts.
I totally agree. And the thing is, we live it every single day. I mean, the fact that we're holding iPhones means that there are people who are experts in their fields.
Yep.
And we trust them, and we can't expect to go in and make iPhones if we're not trained. It's just that simple. It's just in parenting. I mean, it's like you're always trying to become an expert in parenting, and you've got to embrace certain aspects of it if you want to be a good parent. I mean, those are pretty undeniable. I will say this, with music, it's tricky, and if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and say something about music. I think it's actually really important to talk about with this, because if you notice, you and I are both being careful when we're talking about this. Why are we being so careful about this thing called music, and not wanting to upset anybody, or anything like that? Well, music is really interesting. Music has a very unique place in human history and human existence. This is not to compare in a negative way to any of the other fine arts or art forms, but with all the art forms that exist in human existence, music is and always has been the most consumed form of art and expression ever. And music is like the most personal form of artistic expression that we have. It's the reason why we have an iPhone. We don't have an iPhone because we need phones. It's because it's an extension of our iPod, and that's an extension of the Walkman. But we now walk with our own personal soundtracks of our lives. And in fact, I mean, it's like, obviously movies are nothing without music. It's that simple. And everybody buys their favorite soundtracks. People who don't study music are actually orchestral experts. Experts, because they know the tunes in Lord of the Rings. They know the Batman Rising third horn tune. They know all kinds of stuff, but people know their music and movies and love it. Everybody, loves Star Wars movies, music, and all that kind of stuff. It's just really identifiable. Everybody is actually experts in orchestral music because they see movies. Not only that, but because they watch Netflix now, because all the orchestral music is it's insane. The presence of music is just really unbelievable in our lives. And here's what I like to tell people is like, music is so important in our lives that when we are teenagers, our friendships are forged and broken based on our taste in music. How about that?
I might agree with you to a limited extent, but sure. Yeah. Okay.
Oh man, I mean, it's like when you've got, I mean, look, you remember the South Park episode with Goth and Vamp? You know, this like, it's like their music taste. It was really funny, but it's like, the thing is, it's like even movies still identify musical taste with social structures.
Oh yeah.
In high schools and stuff like that. But in the classical world too, people will be like, "Oh, if you like Rachmaninoff, I hate you because blah." I mean, I've heard that before.
I have too. Yeah,
it's awesome. Well, I mean, what it does is on a universe, it just shows you the importance of music in our daily lives.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about musical opinions, it resonates universally. So that's why we have these discussions the way we do, is because music is so critical to every person I know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It really, really is. But I think it's really helpful for us to understand, wow, that's really important to me. I take this very personally. I have my opinions about this. And so this person, music is just really, really up. It's like, it's such a center of everybody's heart that's why we have these types of conversations. And it's also why we end up being careful if we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings and that kind of thing. However, that being all said, well, if, I am an expert in music and I do have these opinions that I've earned through an enormous amount of training and a lifetime experience. And so I do have opinions about musical training. There's no doubt about it. But it's not exclusive to classical music. It has to do with all kinds of music. It's like, for instance, like when people are like, "Oh, can you just play a little jazz?" I'm offended for jazz musicians. I'm like, no, I can't just play a little jazz. I would have to have an entire other 8 hours of the day to practice jazz in order to become a jazz artist, because It's an art form and I don't have the time of day to do that. So it's like lawyers. It's like, if you're a litigation lawyer, it does not make you an expert in family law. It's like you're still a lawyer, but man, the disciplines are radically different. And lawyers are always like, nope, I don't do that because that's those people. And the same thing in music is like, there's so many different types of artistic forms of music. It's fantastic. Each one requires an entire culture of experts to maintain the integrity of that particular culture. It's fantastic.
Yeah, you're making some really good points. And I think we're verging into kind of the aesthetics and philosophy of music here quite a bit.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's a beautiful thing. I love thinking and talking about this, but I often feel like a troglodyte because people like yourself, and I have a few friends who are infinitely smarter than me. I'll bring up a topic and they just take it somewhere I have a hard time following. But I agree, and I read the philosophy of art quite a bit. Actually, it's an important topic to me.
It's necessary. Diversity in our artistic expression is absolutely critical, but it's also inevitable.
Yeah, it is. Yep.
We've got 8 billion people on the planet. There's 8 billion ways to be a person. There's that many ways to be an artist or a musician. It's going to be that way. It's that simple. It's part of our design, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
And that's why there's a constant hunt for new music too, because we always want the new, and we have so many voices to say something.
Yes, and how awesome is that? Isn't that just the coolest, that we're always looking for something new? I mean, that's just awesome.
It is.
So I mean, that's why I say it's like, out of all the times in music history, this is a pretty cool time to be alive, because man, I mean, artistically, it's very confusing. But if you don't let it just overwhelm you, you just look, again, it's the candy shop. You're just like, man, and I didn't know this person was doing this. Oh, they're doing that. Every single time somebody sends me like a new YouTube clip, I'll sit there and go, oh, that is just so cool. I had no idea that was going on. Right. And I just think it's beautiful, So anyway, you're absolutely right. It is ephemeral because it goes into the air. And I mean, look, if all my scores were destroyed, everything was destroyed, well, my music wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
So it's precious. And it's fleeting. And so, but to me, it makes it even that much more beautiful, but the thing is, as long as humans are alive, we will always be looking for new things. We will always be creating. One statement, a bold statement I do like to tell people about the arts, because, we get caught up in very real circumstances of arts missing in schools and this kind of thing. And I really try to take the optimist route. And that is this. Music or art is not, has never been, nor ever will be in danger. Ever. We have had some of the most productive times of art in the worst times in world history. And it will always happen. It will always happen. There will always be a way to find and make art, always. And in fact, a lot of times it's inversely proportional to how bad things are. It's really amazing what happens. Sometimes you don't want to be too complacent because then you kind of lose your drive to express, so it's just, but it's just, art is never going anywhere. It's a part of our DNA. It's just like children in art, it's like, Stephen Sondheim had a great quote with that in Sunday in the Park with George. He's talking about children in art. I'm telling you, man, it's like those two things are never going away.
No, they're not. I agree.
And they will always change. Always, always, always change.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Yep.
All right, so let's kind of go full circle here and go back to your career. We'll walk away from the music art philosophy a little bit, though I'd love to sit down with you over a beer and just dig into this a little bit more. But anyway, I want to ask you something more practically minded.
Yes, sir.
So for those people listening to the podcast and they're listening to you say, "Hey, I'm really paying the bills by getting commissions, and I've got this portfolio lifestyle. How can I get there? And what is one or two actionable things that composers listening to this today could do to move their career forward?"
If you're an instrumentalist, teach lessons. That's the first most practical thing you can do. And teaching lessons, it can be extremely lucrative.
Yes.
And therefore very, very liberating. That's that, and as much as you possibly can, if you have another job or whatever, perform as much as you humanly can, because first of all, it feeds your soul, which you need to continue your passion in music, but also you're in the game. It's that simple. You got to be in the game. And so at this stage, if you're budgeting your time between a full-time job that's not in music, there are evenings and weekends to perform. Get into performance. You've got to.
Yeah.
So those are the two kind of, as an adult, those are the two real tactile things that I can recommend to people the most.
I think it's great.
Yep. Teach and perform. Those are the two main things.
To kind of not put too fine a point on the teaching and how lucrative it can be. I've taught for like almost 30 years, taught guitar lessons.
Yes.
And I've made so much money. I remember when I first started, I was kind of going with what I was paying for lessons. And then as I was studying, and because I started as a teenager teaching other teenagers, and then I started to prepare for university. And I remember all of a sudden I was paying this guitar instructor like $60 an hour. I was like, this is crazy, but it's the level. It upped the aim. And right now there are times when I can make over $60 an hour teaching lessons. And so
that's in Lincoln. I mean, look, if you're in New York City, you're making $200 an hour.
Easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Easy.
Well, I mean, and so oftentimes one of the things that I will do when I'm doing residencies is sometimes I'll ask the teacher, I'm like, look, should we talk about music or money? Which is it? And a lot of times they're like, let's talk about money. And it's so funny because you're like, all right, kids, let's talk about bills. Ready? And it's like, oh. And I'm like, I know you don't want to talk about this, but I've got some really good news for you here. It's important you start thinking about this now because you will start to master it earlier. It's this simple. If you graduate from college with a degree in any kind of in music and you play an instrument, you are worth at least $30 an hour. It's that simple.
Yep.
And the thing is, it's like, anybody else that's in an engineering degree or anything like that. Well, I mean, these people are, in the Midwest here, like cities that you and I are in. I mean, they're scrapping for $17, $18 an hour jobs. And as musicians, we're already doubling that. And that's just out the gate. And so it's like, okay, and let's do the math. All right, $30 an hour, 20 hours a week. How much money is that? Okay, what are your bills? What's cell phone, gas? I mean, we just do the whole chalkboard thing. Write it down and be like, okay, you're teaching 20 hours a week. What are you going to do with the other 20 hours? Well, you're going to practice, you're going to audition, you're going to compose, you're going to start your new ensemble. You're going to be in the chorus, the symphonic chorus, whatever it is you're going to do. Or you could be a full-time teacher and really, pull in the money in. And anyway, you can budget that the way you want to, but it's real. It's absolutely real. And I'll talk to parents about this a lot. I tell them exactly what I just told you. I'm like, hey, listen, your kid, if they get a degree in music, they're set up to make twice as much as what people normally make coming out of college. Mm-hmm. It's really, really quite easy. Now, that means you have to have initiative. You can't just sit back. It doesn't just happen. You have to create a studio, advertise yourself, this kind of thing. Decide if you're going to teach in your home, go to other people's homes, that kind of thing. I go to other people's homes. I don't want to deal with liability in mine. I don't want people's mud in my house.
I can understand that.
But I mean, I will target a neighborhood to where I can, do 5 or 6 lessons in a block, in one evening with a neighborhood, and it's word of mouth. You start when you talk to their parents, this kind of thing. So there's a lot of that networking that goes on in any kind of field. But man, teaching lessons right off the gate has to be in your quiver. Mm-hmm. And it's not just because you have to, but it's also because it's awesome. Teaching music is fabulous, man. And so you're in the game. You're in there. You're in the arena. And then that's why I say when you balance that out with making sure that you're performing, you're in it. And I did that right there, being in the game. You got to be in the sauce, man.
That's good stuff. Really good stuff. Well, I think what I need to do is drive down to Oklahoma and spend the afternoon with you, and we'll have to record around 2 because there's a lot of gold here to be mined, I think. So thank you so much for your time, Jerod.
I am so honored to be a part of this program, Garrett. And man, congratulations and thank you. I really appreciate you. I listen to all your podcasts now. It is part of my curriculum now. and actually, I will go ahead and I told you this on the phone when we were talking a couple weeks ago. Now in my teaching, this is actually part of my curriculum. And that is, I tell people that they are to start tuning into Portfolio Composer because you don't just interview composers. You're talking about restaurant owners as well.
Yep.
It's same structure. It's the same architecture in every human's life. Is how do we make a living? How do we live our lives with meaning and substance? And so to me, it's a lifetime type of it's a life podcast is really what it is. So anyway, all the things that I want to tell them, I'm like, you got to spend hours listening to all these other composers telling you in different ways. So I'm very grateful to your podcast, man. And I'm very, very honored to be a part of it.
Thank you, Jerod. It's my pleasure and my honor to have you on. This episode of the Portfolio Composer has been supported by Dorico, the music notation software from Steinberg. Whether you're a composer or arranger, a teacher or student, working in music engraving and publishing, or working in producing music for media such as film, TV, and games, Dorico is the tool for you. Dorico comes in 2 versions, Dorico Pro for professionals and Dorico Elements, providing the perfect introduction to the world of scoring. Whichever version you choose, you'll be using software packed full of smart features that produces beautiful results completely automatically, allowing you to get music on the stand more quickly than with any other software. You can bring music into Dorico from your existing software using Music XML or MIDI, and you can try Dorico out completely free of charge for 30 days by downloading a trial version from dorico.com/TPC. Try it today.